At the end of an election campaign notable for its often angry and divisive rhetoric.
So does his unexpected victory suggest that there are deep-run divisions in American society, and can President-elect Trump heal those wounds?
Right, well, let's talk to American journalist Beth Gardner and Professor of American History at the University of Nottingham, Christopher Phelps. Morning to both of you. I mean,
good morning.
Beth, first and foremost, are we seeing a country more divided than before, or is it just that these innate differences have been allowed to come to the surface?
I think the answer is that yes, we are seeing a country that's more divided than I think we can recall in modern times. Hillary Clinton said in her concession speech the morning after the election that indeed America was more divided than anyone had realized. I think this goes beyond the emotional reactions to a sort of typical campaign, and we certainly have seen some very bitter campaigns over recent years and very stark partisan divides. But I think, there is a real palpable concern now among those who oppose Donald Trump that, this is a man who built his political career on the racist lie that President Obama was not born in the United States. This is a man who, has advocated and as far as we know, still advocates a ban on an entire religious group entering the country, who has threatened to deport 11 million immigrants. This goes far beyond really any of the norms of American politics. His rhetoric does. That we have seen in recent years. So I think consequently the reaction to him goes beyond the reaction that Democrats may have had when George Bush was elected, or that Republicans, obviously deep disappointment they felt when President Obama was elected twice. I've heard Democrats over the last day or two say that they have not felt this, stunned and afraid since 9/11. So that to me says that, this is extraordinary. This is an extraordinary level of division, and I don't see it. I don't see those, divides being bridged anytime soon.
And Professor Phelps, as we heard Beth Gardner describing there, after such a vitriolic campaign, lots of wounds to heal. But America does have a history of being a divided democracy. We've seen it come together in the past many times. Do you think that it will be able to get over this?
I think this is a serious problem. There are two factors here. One is that most Americans didn't want this president. In the Republican primaries, Trump only won a plurality of Republicans. He didn't win a majority of Republicans. It was that his opponents were so divided that he was able to win. And then in the general election, Hillary Clinton exceeded him in the popular vote. So it's as if democracy were constructed in this instance to produce the result that most people don't want. And that's why you're seeing a lot of tension and a lot of unhappiness. And furthermore, as Beth Gardner has just very well explained, this is a candidate who makes a lot of people feel very unsafe. It makes Latino households nervous, it makes Muslim households nervous, and it makes a lot of Americans who believe that the kind of understanding in American culture that was formed after the civil rights movement of an inclusive and tolerant and multicultural polity is now going to be torn up by somebody who has shown no respect for it whatsoever in his comments. If there's going to be a coming together of the country, if there's going to be unity, it really is going to be Donald Trump's responsibility to signal that the most extreme things that he said in the campaign, the very things that seem to have excited white Americans to vote for him in unusual numbers, are not going to be followed through in policy, that he now understands he must govern in the interest of all Americans. And frankly, I'm pessimistic about it. I don't think the man has the character, the judgment, or the politics, or the inclinations to signal that. And I think we're going to see a period of roiling American society in the next 4 years.
You're both being incredibly pessimistic, though, incredibly negative over all of this. We know that politics is a dirty game. We know that people say all sorts of things to get into power in whatever country they're trying to get elected. The first thing Donald Trump did when he knew he'd won was say, what a great campaign Hillary Clinton had run and what a great woman she was. I mean, he's shown, hasn't he, straight away that he's prepared to be conciliatory.
Yes, I do think that's true. You know, and I think we did also hear, we were talking earlier about Hillary Clinton's comment in her concession speech. She did say that she'd like to see Americans keep an open mind to him. You know, listen, let's see if it lasts. But I think it's also important to be, you know, clear-eyed about, you know, who this person is. Donald Trump is a man over not just the course of the past 18 months and his campaign, but over a lifetime who has really been very, you know, focused on almost nothing more than personal vengeance and an asserting of dominance over those who disagree with him. So I think there's a great deal of worry now about, you know, is this a person who respects democratic norms? Is this, I never imagined that I might say this as an American, but, you know, are we going to see journalists or critics being punished, you know, under this new presidency for speaking out against him? I think that was fairly worrying to see the tweet from him last night criticizing protesters for protesting. Listen, we all know that protest is a normal part of democracy. I can't imagine, you know, Theresa May criticizing people for coming out in the streets to protest against Brexit. She may disagree with them. A Democratic leader understands that that's part of the process and you have to respect it. So I just, yes, I mean, you're right that both of us, I think, are expressing some pessimism about the ability to heal these divides. But I think it's important to be realistic about, you know, who Donald Trump is and what he has shown us about himself over a lifetime, and you know, about whether or not he's going to respect the norms that are the foundation, really, of our democratic system.
Well, let's be realistic then also, Professor Phelps, about the extent of his power, because there are checks and balances in place to protect the Constitution that is enshrined, it is a codified Constitution in the US, and, you know, he has a majority in both houses, admittedly, but there are elections in 2 years which could see the House of Representatives swing back to the Democrats if there are concerns.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't accept that I'm pessimistic. I'm optimistic in that I believe most Americans voted to repudiate this agenda. And I'm optimistic in that I see Americans exercising their traditional rights of freedom of speech and protest. And I know as a historian what that's meant in American history. The civil rights movement took to the streets and transformed the country. The anti-war movement in the Vietnam era stopped a war. And it's possible that these mass protests in advance of Donald Trump assuming the presidency will prevent a kind of horrible mass deportation policy that will rend families and destroy rights in the United States, and a Muslim travel ban that will actually diminish American security by exciting the Islamist extremists. And so I actually think that the American people have great promise. My cynicism is about Donald Trump and his character and his judgment. Now, you're right about checks and balances being part of the American system, but bear in mind that the Republicans now have the House, the Senate. He's going to appoint a Supreme Court justice, which will give the Republicans a majority on the Supreme Court. And he, of course, holds the presidency. And furthermore, his own circle of people are drawn from the farthest right reaches of American society. Breitbart.com journalist Steve Bannon was his campaign manager and looks like he might be White House chief of staff and so forth. The signs aren't good. If Donald Trump wanted to really establish something at this point, he would issue a statement that not just the kind of blasé, pro forma, I'm for unity statements that we've seen in the last 2 days, which seems in a little bit of a way going through the motions of a routine transfer of power, but a real statement about how he repudiates his own racist, sexist, Islamophobic comments in the campaign. And until he does that, a lot of Americans are not going to feel safe, and these protests should continue.
Okay. Well, listen, really good to talk to you, Professor Christopher Phelps and the American journalist Beth Gardner. Thank you both very much for your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
Do let us know what you think about that at Sky Stephen, at Sunrise Isabel. Plenty of tweets